Please be seated. The court is now back in session. We would like to give the floor to Nunchia once again to put a question to the witness Steve Hedder. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, Mr. Hedder, two related quotes. These will be my final quotes from the Ben Kiernan book. I'm referring you to page 55 of his book, page 55 and page 57. English ERN 006 78522. French ERN 00638 up until 85. Khmer 00637 up until 00637 I'm reading you the first paragraph. It's a chapter called Consolidation, the 20 May 1975 conference. All military and civilian officials of the new regime were summoned to a special meeting on 20 May 1975. District and region secretaries came from all over the country, and representatives from all armed forces and units and regions, so there were thousands. This is actually a quote. The assembly was held in the old sports center in the northern part of Phnom Penh. Its purpose was to receive the plan distributed by the center and then return home to implement the plan. The meeting lasted 5 days. Mr. Hedder, you will see that this passage refers to a footnote, footnote 106. And the footnote 106 reads as follows, and I quote, same page. This is Heng Samrin's 1991 account. Chia Sim thought a meeting took place at the Khmer Soviet University. In 1992, Heng Samrin insisted he was right, saying that he was living in the city at the time. This is the first quote. The second quote is on page 57, English ERN 006 78523. French ERN 00638 until 87, and Khmer 00637 until 46. Now on this page 57, Mr. Hedder, I read the following quote. It's the second paragraph. Heng Samrin, then studying military affairs under Son Sen, was also at the meeting. He recalls the use of yet another term. Quote, they did not say kill, they said scatter the people of the old government. Unquote. Scatter, kumchat, them away. Don't allow them to remain in the framework. It does not mean, quote unquote, smash, komtek. Smash means kill, but they use a general word, scatter. Nguyen Chia used this phrase. This appears to be Sin Song's point number 5, though the use of varied euphemism is euphemisms is an important qualification. Now, I read you, Mr. Hedder, two quotes. One about the general presence of Heng Samrin at this 20 May 1975 conference, and one about the things that he said he heard in respect to presumably enemies. My question to you is the following. Do you have, on the basis of your interviews or reading of documents, etc., any factual information to corroborate these two particular passages which I just read to you?
Yes and no. I think I previously mentioned that my material indicates that there was more than one meeting, which would explain why one person says there was a meeting in one place and another person says there was a meeting in another place. It's not that one of them is wrong and one of them is right. It's that people have described to me more than one meeting in more than one place, attended by at least not entirely overlapping groups of people. And I think I did describe these as dissemination of line for implementation meetings. And it's indeed around this time, late May, early June 1975, wrong century. And my recollection is that this kind of information doesn't come from sources as high level as Ben Kiernan's, and not necessarily people who were directly present, but people from defense units, that is to say bodyguard units who accompanied cadre to these meetings, so have some indirect knowledge, have direct knowledge of where and when meetings were held, and indirect knowledge based on what they were told by their superior or superiors about what went on in those meetings. Off the top of my head, I think in terms of at least superficial quality of interviewee, Kiernan's data on this is superior to mine.
But are you able to say whether your data collected from your studying of documents and talking to people, do your data corroborate the particular phrase used by Heng Samrin in respect of what Nguyen Chia during this meeting or other meetings said?
I don't have trouble with the bit that's on, I don't see the EO, it's a half page. The right-hand side of ERN in English 0067853, which is original page 57. I don't have any problem with the reporting about the use of the word, or the non-use of the word smash, which I agree, according to many respondents, was a euphemism generally used to mean kill. I'm troubled by the way in which the term Kamchat is dealt with here. It's not consistent with my interview data. And it's the translation of Kamchat as scatter is, to my mind, incorrect. There's a bound form typical in Southeast Asian languages where something that sounds similar is repeated, a reduplicative pattern. And the applicable reduplicative pattern here in Khmer is kamchat, kamchai. Kamchai literally means something like disperse or scatter. Kamchat is stronger and means get rid of, eliminate. So the reduplicative bound form, kamchat, kamchai, could be rendered into English as eliminate hyphen disperse. So kamchat, to my mind, has a stronger and potentially more worrying meaning than simply kamchai, and comes closer to the notion of kamthek. And I can't tell you off the top of my head whether those particular specific terms are dealt with in any of my interview data. Here I'm speaking from the way in which other interview data generally has been. It gives some indication of the meaning and the usage of these terms.
Have you at one point read the underlying interview itself that led Keenan write this particular passage in his book?
Well, again, at one level, Kiernan is better than me because his interview notes are, unlike my sort of idiosyncratic, peculiar shorthand, written out in full in longhand. But they're in English. So, to my knowledge, the original notes of this interview, which I first saw at DC CAM, are in English. So I presume what's happened is he's written down the English interpretation that he was given when he did the interview. I don't think it's transcribed into Khmer from a tape and then translated from the tape, from the transcription into English. I think what happened was that he took the notes down in English from interpretation. So, and that I can't go back and look at any original Khmer because I don't think there is an original Khmer for this text.
If I can take you to the original interview in this particular passage that Keenan seems to be referring to. Now that is document E3/1568, English ERN 00651884, French ERN 00743356-57, Khmer 0071 3954 007 13955. And in the middle of that page, I read as follows. And here is Heng Samrin being quoted. They didn't say kill, between brackets, the Long Nol leaders. They said, unclear Khmer words, don't allow them to remain in the framework. It doesn't mean smash. Nguyen Chia used this phrase. Could you react on this?
President, witness, please hold on. The prosecution, you may proceed.
Mr. President, it's only really to put this document in context. The defence have, in the past, objected to this document. They're now plainly wishing to refer to it, but I want to place that objection on the record. And we also have an extract being read that has some unclear Khmer words being referred to. Thank you.
Just a quick reply, Mr. President. The prosecution is, I'm sure, well aware that we have used or quoted this passage on various occasions in our requests to have witness 223 be summoned. I don't see if the objection has any validity. We do wish to use this specific passage from this document. So I would like to be able to put the question to you more specifically, to give a reaction. That's my question to you, Mr. Header, about the words. Don't allow them to remain in the framework.
President, witness, please hold on. The National Lead Co-Lawyer for Civil Parties to make the floor. But, Mr. President, the formula or question by the Defense Counsel is for the expert, and Mr. Steve Header is here as a witness, not as an expert, and for that reason I object to the question.
Correct. Mr. Header has offered many linguistic interpretations of certain words. He just did it in his previous answer. So I'm now putting another version of the same Khmer words to the witness and asking him to give a reaction. I think that's perfectly within his capacity as a witness.
President, I'd like to hand the floor to Judge Lavange to clarify the decision or our ruling that we made to the objection to the last question put to the witness by Nunchi's Defense Counsel. Judge Lavange, please take the floor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The Chamber rather believes that it would be necessary to consider the question put as a question aiming at interpreting an expression in Khmer. So it seems that rather this interpretation would be within the scope of an expert. So unless the witness has factual elements which would allow us to provide a more precise answer to the question raised by the defense, the Chamber believes that there is no need to put this question to the witness, and therefore is asking the defense to put another question. Unless, Mr. Heder, you have any precise and factual elements that you would like to raise.
No, I don't actually, because in this instance, I can't figure out what the original Khmer may have been. Doesn't make sense to me in English. Doesn't appear to me as something that I can understand as a mistranslation of something with which I'm familiar. I mean, if I could figure out what I thought it was, then I could say what others have told me about what that means. But I can't do that because I can't get to the first step. So without the original Khmer document or the original Khmer transcription of the discussion, I can't address it.
I'll move on, Mr. Heder. The last hour we have been speaking about, in detail about Heng Samrin. We discussed a little bit his joining the revolution. We discussed to a certain extent his role during the evacuation of Phnom Penh. We have also now discussed his presence and at this 20 May 75 meeting. What we haven't discussed yet, and that is my question to you, do you have any factual information based on your talks with interviewees, reading documents, etc., which allows you to give, or which allows you to give factual information as to the relationship between Heng Samrin and, on the other hand, Nguyen Chia?
To my recollection, the only such information, let's put it this way, the only such information I can remember, I think, is on the case file as a result of interviewing done under the auspices of OCIJ, and not something that is in my possession as a result of my own non-court-related work. So I think the answer is no.
Now, after the open question, I would ask you now a closed question in respect of a possible relationship between Nguyen Chia and Heng Samrin. Do you have factual knowledge coming from your interviews or reading the documents or confessions, etc., which suggests that Heng Samrin was in fact for many years the personal messenger of Nguyen Chia?
I'm pretty sure that comes from sources other than mine, and by other than mine I include sources which may be in the case file as a result of investigation done in the OCIJ period, but therefore is not my personal information. I don't think I have that data as a result of my own non-court work, or as a result of, I don't have it directly myself. If I've seen it, I've either seen it inside the court or within the context of the court, or in somebody else's work.
To be absolutely sure, do you have any factual information from your interviews with people reading the documents, etc., that corroborates the possibility, or that corroborates the fact that Nguyen Chia and Heng Samrin know each other since the 50s, the 1950s?
The President, witness need not answer this question because it is repetitive. It has been asked several times already. And the Defense Counsel is once again reminded that any request for additional time will not be entertained because you have been viewed as not using the base court time.
Last question on the subject, Mr. Heder. I would like to refer you to a footnote in Keenan's book. That is footnote 97 on page 206. English ERN 00678-598. French 0063-8963. Khmer 0063-7675-276. I have maybe another ERN number when it comes to the footnote. That seems to be 0063-9340. Footnote 97, I just read the first few lines. Heder first suggested that the Eastern Zone anti-Pol Pot rebel Heng Samrin was a kind of Kim Philby character who had been passing all the secret documents of the Cambodian Communist Party to the Vietnamese all along. According to Heder, in 1959, Samrin was infiltrated into the ranks of the Cambodian Revolution by the Vietnamese. And he rose as high as he could, and when it became impossible for him to continue to operate, he fled to Vietnam, just as Kim Philby fled to the USSR. Now he's referring to an article that you wrote in The Call, an organ of the Communist Party of the USA, 5th March 1979. My question to you is, did you in fact write this passage about Heng Samrin being Kim Philby?
The President, witness please hold on. The National Lead Co-Lawyer for the Civil Party, you may proceed. Counsel Pechang, good afternoon, Mr. President. And good afternoon, Your Honors. I look at the email sent by the Senior Legal Officer of the Trial Chamber dated the 3rd of July 2013. It specifies very clearly that this witness before us will testify on case 002/01, and I believe that the question being put by the Defense Counsel is not relevant and it is beyond the scope of the current case, and I object on this basis, Mr. President.
I'm only asking about a question about a footnote referring to something that this witness has written, and my only question is, did you in fact write whatever has been quoted in the footnote? That's my only question.
The President, the objection is not sustained. A witness is now directed to respond to the question.
I don't think it's something that I wrote. I think it's something that I was quoted as having said, and quoted in a manner that didn't reflect the full context in which this was put forward as one of several alternative versions of what might be the reality.
I'm not quite sure if I understand fully your answer. Could you clarify?
I previously mentioned that I was in contact with this group, and my recollection is that I had conversations with them, both with regard to their trip to Cambodia in mid-'78 and events that occurred thereafter, and this is quoted by them, not written by me, but quoted by them in their journal, and quoted in a manner that didn't reflect my full views at the time. So it's one of several possibilities.
But did you in fact, that is my last question on the subject, did you in fact say that Heng Samrin was the Kim Philby of Cambodia?
One of several.
The President, witness needs not answer this question. The witness is not an expert, and this question elicit speculation on the side of the witness.
I'll move on, Mr. Heller, to another subject. And that is your book on communism. That's E3/22. And what I would like to do, in order to speed up things, is to quote a few passages from the foreword of the book, the foreword written by David Chandler, because it seems that he summarizes quite well what your point is in the book, what you're trying to prove in the book. So I'm reading these passages, and then I would just like you to say if, in fact, he is making an accurate summary of your book, and if not, maybe you could then expand. And that is, it's not been translated.
Sorry.
Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
This isn't putting to Mr. Hedder what he's written now. It's putting to Mr. Hedder what Professor Chandler has written about Mr. Hedder's book, and asking Mr. Hedder to comment on whether Mr. Chandler's view of what he wrote correctly reflects something. Again, this is an invitation to opinion throughout. The direction from the chamber did not say, please put to Mr. Hedder what people have written about him in forwards to his books. The chamber's direction was, put to Mr. Hedder what he's written in his books, not what other people have written about his books. And this, in my respectful submission, is the flip side of the coin that we had earlier, where Mr. Hedder was being asked to comment on something he'd written about what Mr. Kiernan had written. This is not about this portion of the evidence, about what Mr. Chandler's written about what Mr. Hedder's written about Mr. Kiernan's written about Mr. Hedder. This portion of the trial is designed to address books authored by Mr. Hedder and what Mr. Hedder's had to say. And in my respectful submission, you're not going to be assisted by what Mr. Chandler thinks of Mr. Hedder's book.
It's not a review or anything. There's no dispute between Mr. Chandler and Mr. Hedder. In fact, Mr. Chandler is very happy, it seems, with the book of Stephen Hedder. It's from the forward. I thought it was easier to speed up things, but apparently the prosecution is doing everything to frustrate the questioning. So I'll rephrase Mr. Hedder. Are you in the book, let me rephrase, are you in the book speaking about 4 myths about Cambodian communism? And if yes, could you please explain what you have written in respect of 4 myths of Cambodian communism?
Sadly, you're going to have to refresh my memory. Maybe Chandler goes on to enumerate the myths, specify the myths.
The President, apparently the Defense Counsel does not have any substantive question. Have you exhausted your list of questions? According to the nature of your questioning now, it appears to me that you do not have any other substantive questions.
That is not correct, Mr. President. I have many substantive questions. Mr. Hedder, did you write in your book that the Communist Party of Cambodia and its predecessors were not communist at all?
Page, reference, help, please.
No, I'm not allowed to quote from the book, so I won't give a page.
Are we in a court of law or a playground?
Now, that is a very good question.
Can I say that stronger? Can this council please be directed not to ask any more questions? We are in the bounds of irrelevance. We're now getting into the bounds of insults. He should be stopped now, and other council should take over.
I'm asking a very relevant question on the book of this witness about communism. And I'm asking if in his book he wrote, in fact, or one of his central points in the book was that the Communist Party of Cambodia and its predecessors were communist. And that he reckoned.
Why do we have conventions of courtesy? We have them so that you can follow this question and I can follow this question. Can he please be directed? Because I can't do it. Only you can do it. And it's time for a direction now.
May I respectfully submit that the prosecution has nothing to say about the way I phrase my questions. It is a perfectly legitimate question. I was trying to do it by using the words of the foreword by David Chandler. Now,
the President, Council, you should follow the practice that we have done thus far, and other parties are also supposed to do the same. And you have been in this proceeding for a long time, so if whenever you refer to any particular portion, you should mention the document reference, document number, as well as the relevant year and page. So you should try to be as specific as possible. You have to point to a specific document as well as the relevant pages, and it should be available in the 3 languages as well for the questioning of this witness.
As you know, Mr. President, this book has not been fully translated. It's only in English. There's a few passages in French and Khmer. I will put a very simple question to this witness. Mr. Hedder, what is your central thesis in the book, Communism? Cambodian Communism and the Vietnamese Model.
One could say that this book is written in the intellectual tradition of something known as post-colonialism, the central thesis of which is that anti-colonial political activity often, maybe even typically, involved internalized practices derived from colonialism but turned outwardly against the colonists. And in this particular instance, this book is as an example of that genre, intellectual genre. I'm looking at the ways in which, according to the evidence that I saw, the Cambodian communist movement in its origins was very heavily influenced by Vietnamese communist structure, organization, ideology, and practice, which was natural because it grew out of an Indo-Chinese Communist Party, which included both Vietnamese and Cambodians, and that over time, those internalized phenomena were turned against the Vietnamese, so that, in a sense, the colonialists' modes of thinking and modes of behavior were used against those who were deemed colonialists. And this is, in fact, a pretty cliched, standard mode of analysis in the time that I was writing the book with regard to understanding colonialism and anti-colonialism. It was a bit novel of me to apply it to this particular situation, but it was kind of standard in terms of general political theory.
I would like you to have a look. I don't know if you have your book in front of you. Mr. President, could I hand a copy of the relevant pages to the witness?
The President, court officer, please obtain the document from the counsel and hand it over to the witness for his examination. The President, the witness, you may proceed.
I've now looked further at the footnote in the Kiernan volume about which you asked me, and I note that Ben goes on to quote something that is dated 1980, in which, as he points out, I put forward a rather different view, one might say hypothesis, about Heng Samrin. And I think the important thing here is that this is at a point in time when indeed I was guessing, and so various very different possibilities were coming from me. And it's sort of been portrayed as if this is a weakness. Well, maybe it's a weakness, but maybe changing your mind as more and more evidence emerges, more and more interviews are done, more and more documents are viewed, that should be, in fact, not considered a weakness but a strength. That's what one ought to do. One ought to revise one's understanding, one's summary of the facts, hopefully an objective summary of the facts, as the facts become more voluminous. He goes on then to talk about something we've previously discussed, and that's why I want to link these things together. At the end of the footnote, he reverts to the question of what happened in cross-border raids in 1977, and suggests that because I changed my mind, or may have changed my mind, between March of 1979 and sometime in 1980, that everything I subsequently have concluded is suspect. Well, yes, it shows that I am infallible. I'm not infallible. It shows that I changed my mind. But as I said in my previous testimony with regard to the last point that's covered in this footnote, that reflects an accumulation of data material, or if you will, evidence. Whereas these earlier things, I wouldn't necessarily stand by either of those two earlier formulations.
Thank you for that clarification. I would like to turn your attention to page 123 of your book on communism, chapter 7. For the record, that is E3/22. More particular, it is ERN 00393786. Since there is no French translation, I will read it slowly. Page 123, the last paragraph. In July 1967, the Vietnamese proclaimed that communists in other countries could best help them against the US by waging violent struggles against imperialism, like the Bolshevik, Chinese, and Vietnamese revolutions. Even if empty-handed, they must eventually rise up to wage armed revolution. While attacking their enemies politically, economically, and diplomatically was also necessary, the decisive factor would always be the masses' armed and political struggle. End of quote. A little further, the next page, in fact, Mr. Header, that is page 124 for you, ERN 00393787. By deviating from the violent path, communists would allow the local lackeys of imperialism to exterminate the party of the proletariat and do away with the revolutionary organization. All communists must understand that when political struggle developed to a certain level, not supporting it with armed struggle would cause heavy damage to the revolution. A little further, on that same page, in an October analysis similarly disseminated by Vietnamese media, party chief Le Duan raised the specter of a reactionary coup d'etat in Cambodia as a result of US machinations there to take advantage of its economic difficulties and certain weak points of Sihanouk, who was in danger of again becoming dependent on US imperialism. A little further, Le Duan's October analysis is also reaffirmed that other communists must learn the lessons of the Vietnamese revolution in order to fulfill their duties as revolutionary vanguards in their own countries. To give their struggles a popular character, they must use both political and military forces to launch uprisings of the oppressed and exploited masses when the situation was ripe for the revolution. The next page, Mr. Header, senior in the middle, that is ERN 00393788, senior Vietnamese theoretician Trong Chin made the same points in an early November 1967 speech. When the revolutionary movement was suppressed in an extremely cruel manner, it had no other path to follow than that of revolutionary violence. And finally, that is the next page, page 126, ERN 00393789. Everything the Vietnamese were saying provided the Cambodians with reasons why this path was the only ideologically sound one. It was the right one for small countries and small peoples, even if their Communist Party was weak and empty-handed, and regardless of how much more powerful US imperialism might appear to be. It was the only way to avoid inviting destruction by US imperialism and its local lackeys, and the best way to help the Vietnamese in their war against the US. And finally, the next page, that is page 00393790 ERN, page 127 on the top. Not to proceed on one's own would be contrary to the principle of independence, self-reliance, self-sufficiency, and mastery of its own destiny. Moreover, the need to follow the path of revolutionary violence remained an inescapable law of contemporary world history, part of every Communist Party's historic mission to be fulfilled as one of its vanguard duties. Now, I've read you various quotes from leading Vietnamese politicians and military in the 60s. Does your reading of interviews, documents, etc., allow you to make a factual confirmation as to the policy that was advised to the Cambodians or the CPK as the one they should follow? Is there any?
This is the trouble again we get when we don't have footnotes read out. Some of the assertions that my learned friend has referred to are backed up by footnotes. I'll give you an example of one phrase that's not backed up by any footnote and amounts to opinion evidence. Moreover, the need to follow the path of revolutionary violence remained an inescapable law of contemporary world history, part of every Communist Party's historic mission to be fulfilled as one of its vanguard duties. There's no footnote attaching to this. There's not a footnote attaching to each portion that my learned friend has quoted. And now Mr. Heder is being asked to give an answer which is based on opinion elements in a question about a policy that is not defined in the question and which relates to 6 separate abstracts, 4 of which were not footnoted. This is not the way to do it, and I object.
The fact that the prosecutor has been referring.
President, the National Political Lawyer for Civil Parties, you may proceed. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to be on my feet to support the objection raised by the prosecution, and I wish to add that this kind of question is for the expert, and the read out by the counsel is too fast, and it is difficult to understand my interpretation of that fast-paced speech. Please, if you need to refer to long extracts, please do it slowly so that the interpreter could get a full interpretation of your text.
I'm reading a passage. I'm asking the question to the writer of this passage, or these passages, whether he has factual information to back up what he has been saying, in addition to the sources mentioned in his footnotes. That's I'm not interested in the footnotes. I can read the footnotes myself. I'm interested in if he has any other factual information to these passages, and whether there's factual information which corroborates his apparent point of view that Vietnam was supplying the policy and the policy terms to the CPK.
President, the objection raised by the prosecution and supported by the national lead co-lawyer by several parties to the last question by the International Council for Unknown Cheer, Victor Coupe, which seems to draw his opinion as an expert and which is contradictory to the instruction by the chamber, as this witness appears before this chamber as a witness. And for that reason, the witness is directed not to respond to that question, and the objection that is raised is sustained. And Mr. Stewart, you may take the floor.
I'm not sure I fully understand the connection between the prosecution objection and your ruling. Not questioning the ruling, but the prosecution argument, as I understood it, is there are things in this text for which there are no footnotes, and I think a conclusion was drawn either by prosecution or by the bench that this means that what is there is opinion and not factual in the sense that it's something that is attributed to another document. And again, it's been a while. I think what's going on here is intertextuality, as it's known in the academic business. I'm restating here things that are footnoted somewhere else in the document. The phraseology, the formulations I use here are lifted, if not entirely verbatim, rather closely from something that I've already said somewhere else with a footnote. and therefore the sort of standard practice to save space and for other kind of just silly reasons is not to repeatedly footnote the same thing when you've already footnoted it. So I'm not sure the conclusion, however drawn, but whoever has drawn it here, that this is opinion in the sense of it's my interpretation rather than fact in the sense that it's effectively me quoting something someone else has said. I'm not sure that's a correct inference from just this page. You'd have to look throughout, I'm afraid you'd have to look throughout the entire book to see whether I've, in fact, indeed, as I think I have said it somewhere else and footnoted it.
And to assist you, Mr. Header, from the beginning of the
President, I think the time for today's hearing is now adjourned, and the time allocation for Nguyen Chi Phan is expired. Today's proceeding has come to an adjournment, and the chamber will adjourn now and resume tomorrow morning, that is Wednesday the 17th July 2013, and for tomorrow we will continue to hear the testimony of the witness, Mr. Steve Heder, who will be questioned by Kirsten Pon's defense. This information is for the parties, the support staff, and for the general public. Mr. Steve Heder, the hearing of your testimony has not yet concluded, and you are invited to return to the courtroom tomorrow morning, and it will commence at 9 a.m. Court officer, in collaboration with the VISU, please assist the return to the residence of the witness Steve Heder and have him return to the courtroom tomorrow morning before 9 a.m. And security guards are instructed to take the two accused, that is Nguyen Chi and Kirsten Pon, to the detention facility and have them return to the courtroom tomorrow morning prior to 9 a.m. As for Nguyen Chi, bring him to the holding cell downstairs, which is equipped with audio-visual means for him to follow the proceeding remotely. The court is now adjourned.